All right, so this is recording now, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the exterior wall systems and things like that. If you just showed up and I didn't get you in the attendance, just come see me at the end of class, and I'll make sure I update it, okay? All right. Hey, maybe I'll start putting names and faces together a little better now. If I keep doing this, why not, right? Okay. So here's my totally sort of inept, quick, just throwing in some walls and floors in a couple of places. I just like 5 minutes before class. I like open up the door for you guys, went back, do a couple things in here really quickly. Let's talk about how to wrap up that outside. Right? You guys had 12 surfaces that were sort of horizontal, 11 vertical, something like that, right? Just sort of inserted in here strategically in some sort of spatial way. Now let's talk about how some of the rules and how we begin to wrap up the outside of this thing. So, if we just simply wanted to make an exterior wall, right, we can do that, right? We know how to do that. Let me just go to, first of all, let me just look at this, right? I'm looking at the grid, and let's say I want to close up a portion of along column grid 8 and then 4, right? So that edge along, let's say, the first floor. I'm going to go ahead and go to my level 1. I can see that I have 8 and 4, so this is the edge I was looking at. If I just wanted to make it, a simple exterior wall, I could go back to wall architectural. And in this case, maybe instead of going with a really skinny 6-inch interior partition, maybe I'll go something beefier, right? Thinking maybe it could be some masonry or some sort of framing back there, then an air gap, insulation, and then some sort of sheathing material, right? Maybe it's some sort of aluminum cladding or whatever it is, right? I don't know. So anyway, let me just go to generic 12-inch, and I'll start to make some 12-inch walls. And look, I think one of the things to consider here is, again, the relationship with all the other stuff you've drawn in, right? And in particular with the columns. Like I said, typically, we're drawing out here, right? An exterior wall typically sort of wraps around. It's almost like cloth, right? We don't just sort of like have cloth self-intersect your bones and skeleton, right? It's usually the same way when we're talking about an exterior envelope, right? We don't want to bridge anything from between inside and outside, right? Thermal bridging, water, any air infiltration, anything like that, we try to minimize, right? All right, so first of all, what I'm going to do is maybe reconsider the wall center line method, right? Where as I draw, I'm drawing the center line and it offsets from that center line and builds me a 12-inch wall, 6 inches on either side. Maybe I'm going to go with finished face interior and watch what happens, right? So if I go finished face interior, and then I start to go around the edges here, well, all right, now it looks like I am, oh, hold on. I did finish face interior, and so now it's like offsetting the interior edge, the exterior edges, staying flush with the columns. Let's see, there's got to be a different method. I'm just going to erase that. And again, it's all about sort of testing these things, making sure it's doing exactly what you want it to do. Let's say core face interior, finish face interior, location line, finish face interior. Yeah, I really kind of wanted, that's weird. I wanted this to be the interior. I don't understand why it's making it basically the exterior. Oh, here, maybe if I go around. Oh, okay, I see. I have to go around the right direction. All right. So if I went clockwise around, then suddenly it's doing exactly the way I wanted it to. If I went counterclockwise around, then suddenly it puts the inside of the wall to the outside and the outside of the wall to the inside, which is a pretty silly thing for it to do, but who am I to judge? It's Monday for me as well. I mean, maybe Revit just wanted today off. Right, and again, I'm just making an exterior wall. But again, looking exactly at the relationship between the wall system and the structure and everything else that you've been looking for. Critical, right? especially when you're in an office and you're going to start to slice these things into wall sections and details, building sections, etc. Right? You want to make sure everything lines up. Same with elevations. Um, you know, if you're, let's say the width of the building is off, then suddenly that has profound implications on I mean, if you think about this, right, you're off by 6 to 8 inches on either side of your elevation, and then somebody who's cost estimating sort of says, okay, here's what it says, and then suddenly they come back and say, well, your measurements were off. Now it's going to cost the client twice as much because to sort of fix it because it's a change order, right? And suddenly, right? So you just want to make sure that, again, you're building this virtually before they would build it physically. You want to make sure and use that precision, being able to see these things in real time to your advantage, right? To sort of avoid errors, to make sure it's doing exactly what you want it to do. You can see that by default height, it's just sort of 20 feet unconnected to anything. And let's say I'm just going to set that to level 3. I'll set this one to level 2. Right. I'm just sort of, I'm not really, I mean, keep in mind I'm just demonstrating a few things quickly. I haven't really done much of an elevation study here, right? Now, let's talk about that, right? Because it's really easy to start looking at this thing in elevation. I just click through them, right? And let's talk about these elevations just a little more. And currently, I'm sure you've noticed that down here on the bottom, right? Mine's set to wireframe. We could actually change this to shaded, consistent colors, textures, and realistic. So I'm just going to set this to shaded. Right. And let's see. You see this sun with a little light bulb? I can turn the sun on. In fact, I could see its settings. And I could tell it exactly where I'm located. And then I could actually give it a precise day of the year and time of the day. So let's see here. Let me turn on the sun system. Yeah, sure. All right. And let's go to sun settings, and let's just say in session still. Location, let's change it from Boston, Massachusetts to something a little more relevant to us, like, do you want to, I don't know, what does that mean? Las Vegas, Nevada? There we go. There we are. Let's tell it, let's say 3:55 p.m. Sure, why not? Date, May 10th. What's today's date? September 30th? Gosh, it's almost October. Jeez. Time flies, that's for darn sure. 9/30/2004. How about 2024? Where'd I get 2004 from? That's weird. Okay. Seriously. Okay. How about today? There we are. All right. Let's bring this down into the morning, late morning, somewhere around closer to today. All right. Now, when I go to 3D view and I turn the sun path on, yes. You can see that now I have a compass and I have the sun path, at least for one particular time of the day, and I can see exactly where the sun is. And you can actually do solar studies over time with Revit really quite easily. Let me just turn the sun path off for a minute. But I have the sun on, and so theoretically, if I start to have overhangs and things like that, you should start to see shadows being cast on these sort of flat elevations as you move around them. Let's see, sun on. Is it on? Las Vegas, here we go. All right. And again, let's go with something like shaded. All right. So as we start to move these things around and start to actually add surfaces, external surfaces, we'll start to sort of see these things materialize in elevation and start to make better judgment calls on what these things actually look like. We can also go again to the axon to sort of see these things. Let's talk a little bit about, in addition to exterior walls, let's talk a little bit about roofs, all right? So let's say we have the top here. I can say roof by footprint. Again, I'm in the architecture tab. Roof by footprint. And it says you've created the roof on the lowest level. No, yeah, I'd like to put it on level 4, sure. Let me just go to level 4, and I can draw it there. That would probably be nice. And now it's saying, go ahead and draw a boundary line. So I can start to maybe close up some things here as needed. Now watch what happens when I draw, oops. Come on. Let me just hit the X and start over. Yes, discard the roof. Roof by footprint. Let me come out here and draw it over this part right here. Just start drawing a polyline. And again, I haven't given a ton of thought to what I'm drawing here at the moment, just because I'm doing a demonstration for you guys. What I will do is I'll drag that later and fix this. Right, a jump right here. Let me go ahead and hit OK. Let me select this again. I just edit the footprint, right? We can always edit the footprint and then move this up there, right? Line is too short. Okay, expand. Oh, I see. Come on. Sorry, there was a way to just delete the line that was too short. This edge says it's disappearing, or it's too, yeah, delete errors. Okay, so resolve the error that way. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit the plus sign, but look at this thing in 3D. It's pretty gross, right? I mean, if you like 1980s Ramada Inn looking thing, there you go, right? Maybe that's a Hampton or a red roof, I don't know. By default, it wants to put a hip roof on. That's pretty inappropriate for a building of this size in the desert, right? Typically, particularly when we're thinking sort of desert modernism, we're thinking flat roofs. This is great if you have lots of snow load, right? We don't get 4 feet of snow every winter, do we? Not down here in the valley. All right, so with this selected, you can see it's blue, right? I can say slope, and right now it's set to 912 slope. I can just change that. Let's change it to 0, 10, 12. So for every 12 inches of horizontal travel, instead of going up 9 inches, it's going up 0 inches. And we'll apply, now that thing is flat, okay? But it's still classified as roof. All right. Revit likes to make the roofs green by default. So there's that. All right. So this is a big expansive wall. Let's talk about a little more nuanced ways of making walls, right? So if I go to architectural wall and I look at the types, right, you can see that there's lots of basic generic walls, and there's you know, all kinds of sort of material systems here. Concrete, CMU, and with brick over top, just CMU, split face CMU, wood shingles on wood studs, etc., right? There's a number of wall types, and you can create your own or download others if you need them. I don't like to actually design by pull-down menu personally, but sometimes it can be helpful if you're just using a pretty standard system, right? We talk about this a lot, right? Rhino is good for the non-standard, Revit's really good for the standard. All right. But if we go down, we can also see that there are curtain walls, right? What are curtain walls? Oftentimes we see them as glass, but they're basically walls that are prefab and then clipped in place in larger chunks, right? So things like exterior glazing, curtain wall, storefront, those sorts of things. Then you can say stacked wall, right? Curtain wall basically implies that, again, this is an envelope, a sort of skin hung on top of, over top of the structure in the slab, right? So if we say exterior glazing, then I can start to draw a different type of wall. Let's see here, where should I put this? Maybe I'll put it right in here. All right, now let me just, again, let me undo that. And let me do this one more time. Wall, curtain wall, exterior glazing. Now let me look at, again, this, why is it not letting me define wall center line, location line? It's not letting me change that. Well, at any rate, what I'll do is I'll infill almost like it's storefront between walls and columns. So I'll go ahead and hit that. So you can see that it starts here and ends here, and then I'll start one here that'll end up there here in just a minute. Let me just zoom out and reposition this a bit. Okay, so wall, architectural, and again, we're just talking about a different type of wall. We can scroll down, and we could find curtain wall classes here. All right, let's go to the 3D version. Let's see what it actually drew for us here. Maybe. In fact, where did I draw that? Let's see. L1, so I'm between 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Okay. All right, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. So 5 and 6, and then 3 and 4. So right over here. Okay, somehow I missed that earlier. So you can see that I just have basically Revit's representation of panes of glass here, right? Yeah, let's let it come into focus, right? We think about curtain walls, we usually think, there's lots of different ways to make glass curtain walls, right? You guys ever look at this stuff when you're walking around? So, I mean, the curtain wall's out here in let's say, School of Architecture in the lobby, right? You see they have the aluminum mullions, right? So basically an extrusion, aluminum extrusion that sort of holds everything in place becomes the sort of lateral structure, right, for wind loads and people bumping into it, and door opening, swinging open, fashion closed, etc., right? Oftentimes, though, now you see like butt joints with the glass and just a simple gasket or some silicone bead in between. Maybe things are held together with spider clips or some other sort of hardware. Anyway, what we can do is we can now go to curtain grid. And we could start to draw our own grid here on the glass if we wanted to. And sometimes it's easier to do this in 3D view where you can see it. Sometimes it's easier to do it in elevation. Sometimes it's easier to do it in plan, depending on what you're trying to do and where you're trying to put it. But if I go to architecture, curtain grid, I could start to, here, let me just try to position this so it's a little less, the column's a little less in the way there. Right, you can see that there by default there's some sort of grid here, right? I can add to it. Let's say I wanted to make a 2x2 or 4x4 or 4x8 or 5x10 grid. I could begin to change that across this. Let me just look at this. Okay, yeah, here we go. So let me just go to curtain grid. What we can do is we can begin to adjust this and even add as we need, right? So if we didn't like this, the way they've sort of infilled this, we could change it or add to it or make it more dense. The other thing that I notice here now when I select the wall is that it's just 20 inches or 20 feet. Come on. So let me just say not unconnected, but let's go up to level 2, 3, level 3. And I'll put this one up to level 3 as well. Okay. So there's a couple of things here. Now watch what I do. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to say curtain grid, and then I'm sort of going back and forth here. You can see once I have the curtain wall type, right, I can go back and forth between curtain grid and mullions. Curtain grid will allow me to sort of place the grids and move things around. With mullions, I can then say all grid lines, and I can say turn them all into mullions. Do I want 2.5 by 5? Let's make them as small as possible. 1.5 by 2.5. That sounds good. I can select this, and now the whole grid turns to, all the edges turn to mullions, right? Now, if I look at this now so I can sort of see better where these mullions end up, I mean, when we think about curtain walls, some of it's usually glass, right? What happens when we have the sort of span between, let's say, a floor and the ceiling? We usually call that a spandrel panel. We make it look like glass, but it's actually opaque. We can sort of cover that stuff up. So that's kind of up to you. If you want to have it glass all the way up and expose the structure and not care about it. But one other thing you'll notice is that we need to move our wall because right now it's sort of conflicting in a number of ways, right? So let me just go back to level 1. And again, it's just working it back and forth, just like if you had a physical model and you're sort of moving planes around. But you have the benefit in Revit of being able to sort of edit, again, as you go without having to do a lot of remodeling, which can be pretty handy. I'm going to move this outwards. The other thing you might notice, it's kind of weird, and I think it has everything to do with the direction I drew this, but it looks like the interior is to the exterior, and the exterior is to the interior, right? When I look at this. So I'd probably want to redo that. Here, let me just maybe make a new one, right? And this will be good practice. Wall architecture. I'll just go ahead and snap and snap and snap. Okay, I believe I just made the same mistake. So let me just go again, let's say from top down and right, let's say left to right, and let's see if that changes things. Blah. I can't talk today. Go from there to there and to there. Yes, that's looking better already. All right. Let me go back to my 3D view. Let me just make sure, again, I'll have to readjust that height. That's stupid that I have to keep doing that, but it is what it is. Level 3. All right. Okay, and last but not least, let's go ahead and put these mullions in. Let's make them, see, I could say just the grid line I select, just a little segment of it, or all the grid lines. Let's do all the grid lines at once. All right. Now maybe this is, again, it kind of bugs me that it's doing this. Maybe I would go back through and sort of figure out what the module is and say maybe I just have a 3-foot module or something that sort of lines up a little better so you don't have such a leftover right here and right here. So let me just undo making those into mullions. And let's go back to the curtain grid and see what we can do to sort of change the stuff around. So, for instance, right here, when I look at this, oops, I just snapped and made a grid line. All segment, one segment, all except picked. Place a segment on all panels except those you select. All segments. So this is placing a new one. I want to modify, let's see. Sometimes I have to sort of remember, remind myself what this stuff does. Activate controls dimensions. No. This might be one of those things where one of you, if you've used this a lot, can remind me. Curtain grid, curtain system, 5x10. Oh, I see. All right. Now I'll just go to curtain grid. I've already made something here. This drives me crazy. Select it. Five by 10. Select multiple, create system. Select. All right, well, for whatever reason, it's not working for me. But suffice to say, there's ways to sort of, again, this is me copying out because I'm just so physically exhausted right now. And now I have to travel. So you can put in mullions, you can start to drag these things around, you can redesign this thing if you'd like. when you're ready to actually put in mullions, if you so choose, right, you can go to mullions, say, let's select all grid lines, and let's turn them all to mullions. I'm not sure why I can't, why it's not letting me change this. It's really annoying, to be blunt. I mean, I can place something there and then again just add a mullion, but I'm just a little miffed that for some reason I can't have more control over this. It's just, it totally escapes me. I'll look it up and show you guys on Wednesday. For whatever reason, I just don't use Revit enough to get it to be nice with its curtain wall tool. But anyway, that's how you can start to add large windows on the outside, right? And again, one of the key things I would say is you have to make a decision on how you begin to actually fashion the exterior of your building. You're allowed to put roof or exterior wall on all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faces, right? But you can really only cover up like half of each sort of face of the overall elevation, right? So if I go to east elevation, max I can use 4, 4.5, 5 panels. That's it, right? There's 9 opportunities, right? So thinking about how the interior that you just did translates into exterior, right? Just sort of read these things. It's really key. And don't worry about it, right? You don't have to, we're making a pavilion. We're not making like a building that has to be air conditioned. Right? So think about that as well, right? This is sort of a folly of pavilion. I'm not really going to be able to critique and help you design 38 of these individually, right? I mean, there's no time. Here's a couple of guidelines, right? Whenever you're doing sort of composition like this, look at each side, including the top. Do the same thing if I had you guys working with foam core out here in model space, right? Each side should be interesting. If you have a dull side, a boring side, right? Like this one's kind of boring, to be honest. Then that means you need to start to rethink and edit. You can always subtract, edit, change the height or change where the base is to the exterior walls, right? All right. So, and again, when it comes to that top, use a roof. Okay. Make sure you have that set to roof. Shall we talk about making some quick perspectives? Yeah, some of you probably already know how to do this, I'm sure. But if I go to View, and here under 3D View, right, where I had a default 3D view, that's usually an axonometric projection, right? A paraline drawing. But if I say camera, then I can, let me just go maybe to level 1. I can place a camera on the inside. I can show where it's pointed at. Okay. Now when I do that, I get another 3D view. You can see under 3D views, now I have 3D view 1. Of course, I can go ahead and can always rename this if I wanted to. Call this perspective interior perspective 01 or something like that. Right. Now inside the interior perspective view, I have a frame, and I can make this wider angle if I want. I'm staring directly at a column, which is kind of weird, but let me just sort of, again, think about how much I see here. Right? Whenever you start a drawing, digital or otherwise, analog, where that frame is and what you're seeing is really key. All right, so there I have interior perspective. Starting to get some stuff overhead. I probably, again, if I'm thinking about this, horizon line's right here. Maybe I'll get a little more, just a little more floor in there. Kind of curious to see how, okay, starting to get wildly wide angle and, okay. So maybe something like that. And of course, this is set to wireframe. I can set it to shaded. Let's just see what it looks like. All right, quickly. I can make sure that the sun is turned on. Sun settings, still, Las Vegas, September 30th, hit apply. All right. And if I really wanted to render it, I could, again, I'm in the view tab, I could hit the little teapot here and we could just try a quick render. I mean, you're not going to get some sort of really fancy render out of Revit or Rhino. You can start to set some materials and things like that. Certain materials have been set, or certain shaders or certain colors have been set based off of what sort of family these things are, like beams versus walls. But what I'm most interested in, at least for our purposes, is, oh, sorry, I didn't set it to render. I should do that. And let this go while I talk. It shouldn't take too long. There's nothing too crazy here. But again, this idea of quickly getting some soft shadows, setting the time of day, time of year, right? We might actually set this up so that you're getting like this sort of, volumetric light rays through a place during the equinox or something. But anyway, let's just sort of, it's at 12%. So there's a couple of things here, right? One thing you'll notice, our diagram, we brought in from Rhino, which is the sort of generic object. So it's like this weird layer color of blue, right? Our beams are set to sort of like, it looks like kind of a bit rusted steel. And so again, thinking about this, right? We have some reflections here that's kind of weird. You can choose to render it here in Revit, okay? And you can add more stuff here. We can talk more about that on Wednesday. Just wanted to show you a few things, or you can just say simply like shaded, talk about just sort of consistent colors and textures. For whatever reason, I wonder if it's just where I'm looking here. But what I'm doing is I just want some base assets I can bring into Photoshop and really start to collage over, right? And then I'll talk about this on Wednesday, and when it comes to sort of photo montage and collage, I'm not necessarily interested in photorealistic stuff. But again, sort of a design drawing that, again, speaks to intention and maybe embraces the idea of collage and layering things in. But for now, let's just sort of talk about this, right? So I have some options here, and again, I want to just make sure I turn my sun on each time. Let's see, that's set. Maybe I set it to an afternoon or something and see if that makes a difference. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I'm sort of looking at this. Let's see. This looks totally unimpressive in elevation right now. So my apologies there. Yeah, save the project. And then I have, in this view, I have the sun path still on, so I'll turn that off so that stuff gets rid of. But anyway, let me just show you a better example that has some exterior stuff. Open. Let's see. I'll do 767 demo from the summertime. Right, so here I have the sun turned on. This is just a simple elevation, and now it's showing me shadows, and this is, again, just a very simple shaded elevation. Oops. I didn't turn the other one off, of course not. The other project. 767 demo, okay. Yeah. You ever have one of those days where you just feel like you shouldn't have gotten out of bed? Right? So this was just bringing something into Rhino and rendering it with them and talking about these things. And of course, you can make perspectives like we talked about on the inside, on the outside. Let's see what kinds of things we have here. And I think I have the sun off here. But let's talk a little bit about then what happens. Let me just turn this off. Let's go back to this one. All right. Sorry, my goal there wasn't to confuse everybody. My goal was just to simply show another project pre-made. But anyway, let me show you how you can then, if you prefer, I'll just show you the difference between Revit render and Revit stuff and Rhino. Yeah, what's up?
What if we turn on the shadow right next to the sun?
Oh, maybe that's why I'm missing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, of course you have to do that too. There we go. Boom. There we are. All right. Thank you for my painful. I mean, you would think that like when you turn the lights on that the shadows would automatically appear. No, of course not. This is Revit. There's a setting for that. All right. So yes, thank you very much for pointing that out. All right, here we go. All right, so you can see again, and you can also, again, let me just show you the sun path, because you can do a sun setting, which is actually, or sorry, a sun shading study, which is actually pretty helpful. So you can do a solar study. You can see when I go to that, you can see some settings up here. You can talk about the setting, you can talk about when the start is, the end, and then animate this thing with the sun and the sky, and start to see how things actually change. Let me just do that. Let me just make sure it has the right sun settings. Let's do the fall equinox. Let's do a single day and hit apply. It's at Las Vegas. And now I can say play preview. And you can see my granularity. I only have, like I can make every hour a frame, or every minute a frame, every 5 minutes a frame. So the speed, sunlight intensity, let's see, sun settings, single day, frames, let's see, time interval, every 1 minute, sunrise to sunset, and hit apply, hit OK. Let's try playing it again, right? So you can see when we do this, then sort of every 15 minutes it'll start to, as soon as it starts to play, it'll go from sunrise to sunset. You can see at sunrise, of course, the sun is pretty horizontal. Sunrays are pretty horizontal, so you get some really long shadows. And this appears to be a spotlight. And I'm just waiting on this to continue. It's at 3% for whatever reason. Oh, here we go. Now you can see it sort of incrementally moving in 15-minute increments or something throughout the day. So you can play around with these tools. I think that they're quite useful when you want to sort of, again, think about the sun and the desert. But let me just turn this stupid thing off. And I'll show you, if you wanted to take this back into Rhino, just for rendering, how to do that. There's just a quick, simple fix for this. And I just have to get this thing to stop. There we go. Seriously. I'm just waiting on this thing to respond. But what we'll do is we'll export it out as a specific, I think, DWG format, and then we can bring it into Rhino, and you can sort of, I'll show you guys the difference in the way this thing looks. Maybe I'll just end Revit. Like, seriously, Revit, cut it out. Oh no, it started again. No, stop. Control-Alt-Delete. Task Manager. I'm gonna put you out of your misery, Revit. You're really ticking me off. End task. Put you out of your misery. End task. End task. Thank you. Oh my craziness. Let me just get this restarted. I'll show you how to export so you can go back and forth. Between these things. What I want you guys to do is simply finish up the outside. Then we'll start to take some quick perspectives that we can bring into Photoshop and start to play around with. All right? Let's do this one. Why not? I'm a glutton for punishment. Let's try it. Uh, 3D views. Okay, let's do that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say File, I'm going to say Export, and yeah, I'm going to go CAD format. Let's see. So we have DWG, DXF, DGN, OBJ, SCSI, SAT, and an STL. STL is great for 3D printing, stands for stereolithography. Let's go with DWG. And what's key is that a box is going to pop up asking me for, do I want to move on and export this out? What I'm going to do first is hit the ... here. I'm going to say modify the export setup. And here where it says solids, instead of turning all the Revit solids into poly meshes, like a bunch of little triangles, I'm going to say use SCSI solids. And hit OK. Maybe I'll go to units and just double check one DWG unit is an inch. Maybe I say a foot instead. I don't know. I'll just leave it at default. I'll go ahead and hit next and export this out. Now it's going to export it out as a DWG. You can of course name it. Let's say Revit to Rhino export and put that on the desktop in my case. So I can see it and hit OK. So that's important. All these pieces now will be solids, right? Like poly surfaces rather than a bunch of unusable meshes. So that's it, right? I'll show you that as soon as it's done. I'll bring that into Rhino and look at how Rhino renders things. Once again, I'm confronted with a computer that takes a while to do what I ask. Yeah, there's a bunch of diagrid in here. I can see its point. Lots of lattices, struts and nodes. Really wish I had done this, had a version exported out already. I could just show you guys. Sorry. Well, that's going. Might as well fire up Rhino. And let's just double check. I don't see it. I see the Project 02, the Revit file. Don't see the DWG yet, so it's still writing the DWG, I guess. Not responding. It'll respond soon, I hope. Please. Says it's ready. Okay. One thing I'm going to do is, it said Autodesk units were inches. So maybe in here, I'm going to go in Rhino, I'm going to say set my units, make sure they're set to inches. Let's see if that maintains the scale here when I bring this exported file from Revit into Rhino. Oh, is it done? It's done. Hot damn. All right, good deal. Took a little while, but you know, it's got a bunch of geometry in it. Let's see. So I have this, I'm just going to say file import. I've set my units to inches. There's that DWG. I'll go ahead and open that up. And let's see, model units, layout inch, both are set to inches. So I'll try this. I'll go ahead and hit OK. Just leave that default. Now, all that stuff we exported, we have to import into Rhino. It might take a minute or so. So you have your options, you know, how you begin to make some base, just some quick base renderings, some base perspectives. Again, I'll have some examples to show you guys when it comes to sort of photo montage and collage, right? On Wednesday when we meet, and then we'll do a little bit of Photoshop together, right? But the key thing is to close this thing up, or you know, work on the outside now, according to the rules. 4 to 5 cells on any given face. That's it, with exterior curtain wall or exterior solid wall. And just like a stacked wall or something, or cast wall, depending on what you're thinking. And again, think about the elevation, how nice it looks on all 4 sides plus the top. All right, something's in here. Let's see. Creating meshes, and I can start to see some yellow selections here. Let's see. Ah, here we go. All right. So you can see, again, it's just simple geometry now. I might start to say cell curves, select all curves, and just get rid of those if I don't want those column grids in Rhino. They look a little weird in Rhino. They're totally necessary in Revit. They look a little odd in Rhino to me. And again, if I go to, let's say, rendered mode, let's see what that looks like really quickly. Right, so you can see automatically it just gives you sort of radiosity soft shadows. It's not ray tracing some particular time of day and location. We can actually set that differently. So for instance, I have a number of these things over here, including properties, but I also have the sun. If I just simply type in the command sun, it'll bring up the box, the options. I can turn the sun on. There we go. You can see now that there's a direction to the sun. It's starting to ray trace shadows and things like that to give you more accurate depiction on a clear day, right? And again, this is just a white clay render, so you know, take it for what it's worth, right? Again, like in Revit, I might just simply assign some very basic shaders to this. If I wanted to, I would steer away from textures, right? And bitmaps. But for instance, here you can again give it your location. We are in, let's say, Las Vegas, Nevada. Now let's set our latitude and longitude accordingly, along with our time zone. And now we can say, let's say this looks like it's pretty close to September 30th at 10:50, so the current time. And you can see that we have a quick rendering, right? I think by default, my render settings, my rendered display mode settings, has a sort of ground plane set so that I can cast shadows onto. One thing I've noticed though is that there's a gap between this. These things aren't quite on the XY plane. So what I might do to fix that is simply make my own ground plane, or move all this stuff down. Let's maybe just move it. I don't know why some of it's not hitting the ground. It's kind of odd. Looks like it should. Well, let me just do this. Let me just go to my render settings, render properties. Should bring up a box here. And ground plane on. And is it like offset or something? Like, that's weird. It looks like certain things are floating, which is odd to me. When I look at it in elevation, it's not. Well, at any rate, from here, I'm just a couple of steps away, I think, from getting some decent base renders. Here's where I have glass. I can either turn that to some transparent sort of material, or I can just get rid of it and just leave the mullions. Kind of depends on how much you want to really worry about reflections and things like that. You can see I accidentally added another mullion grid line without actually turning it into a mullion, so I'm having sort of multiple panes of glass inside of one panel. It's kind of weird, but so going around and auditing, sort of looking at this thing, seeing how it really works. Maybe this is like the Eames house and I leave some of these as opaque and turn them different colors. I don't know. You guys know Ray and Charles Eames? How many of you guys have heard of Ray and Charles Eames? Hopefully some of you have. Some of the most consequential modernist designers, U.S. modernist designers of the 20th century. All right. That looks pretty good, right? When in perspective, when you start to just sort of look at shadows and light, right? Surface and form, volume and void. Not too bad, right? I mean, this facade is really gorgeous. It's not. I'm not going to lie to you. That was just me just sort of making a crappy wall. But you guys need to take a little bit of care and attention to this, right? And then I think you'll have something really quite interesting to again collage things into. All right. Now, part of this class is that I can only sort of show you basic things, really. But how many of you guys have ever gone to Alex Hallgriff's site, Visualizing Architecture? No one's ever heard of this? Man, do you guys like read about architecture? Like look at architecture on your phones? Or no? Come on. Like seriously, like look this guy up. Like he's legit. This is all done in Photoshop with like a mundane Rhino or SketchUp or a Revit model. Like just so this guy's like a real magician when it comes to these sorts of things, and he gives a lot of tutorials, right? So I can show you guys like the bare minimum later this week, and then not next week, but the week after when I'm back in town. But on your own, right? This is part of your craft, right? So again, look at these things. Most of the questions I get, if you just Google it, you can find a YouTube video of someone showing you, like probably 5 different YouTube videos showing different ways of doing things you're looking at. So how to add aerial trees, and what's kind of interesting is when you look at these, right, sometimes it'll just be a quick video. Where he shows you how to do things, but oftentimes you can sort of see it in steps. So he has this initial sort of quick render, and then there's no water. He makes the water, then he, this is fun because all it is just sort of passing this thing downward, making the motion go vertically, and using the smudge tool, doing this back and forth with it, and then putting an overlay layer of water ripple over it. So yeah, I mean, it's once you start to learn some basic tricks with some of the brushes, he starts here, but he starts with this, and then he starts to again layer things in. You can see how he does these sort of things. So, yes, my advice is to simply be involved, right? Be out there, sort of looking at really good examples of drawings. I mean, drawings can mean like sitting at your desk with pencil and paper. It can also mean doing this shit in Photoshop, right? These are drawings as well. Right? Look at what's happening out there. Go to design competitions sites and see who won, right? What kinds of things they submitted. Look for ideas, but also look for techniques for how to do these sorts of things, right? Um, everywhere else I've taught, like within the semester, the students know a lot more about Photoshop than I do. And that's fine because I don't care, right? Like I know enough Photoshop to get by, and I have my own creative work, and I'm good with it, right? I have to deal with how to make it, and all that other stuff. I could care less sometimes about how to render it. But there are legit sites and techniques and workflows you can begin to develop in class or on your own, depending on what you're trying to do here or in studio or in any of the other courses. Okay? So I would encourage you to sort of look around. Visualizing architecture, Alex Hallgreff is one of those. This guy's been around for 20 years, and he's still posting these things and showing off his skills, and you can learn a lot from him. Right? Design is a lot of peer-to-peer learning. It's reacting when you see something, right? So you see precedents, right? You can either say, I'm kind of trying to understand what they're doing there, so I can think of a similar workflow, or I hate that, so I'm going to do an opposite workflow, or something like that, right? You can learn from precedents, right? So you got to look around. It's incumbent on you to sort of look around at the tangible, the environment that you're walking through or sitting in any given time, any given day. But also to again, you never had as much information at your fingertips on your devices that you can fit in your pocket than you do right now. So be out there, look at what the current discourse of architecture is. If you want to get a job, the onus is on you to sort of be able to sit in the driver's seat and steer a little bit, right? Okay, so be out there looking at ideas. Look and see how people graphically articulate their ideas. Look at how people verbally articulate their ideas, right? Speaking the language of architecture and design helps you get a job. Making sure your portfolio tells a different graphic story about your work is critical to doing a job, right? So you want to be out there looking at these things and trying to understand them. I'd argue being able to read architecture is just as important when you try to design architecture. All right, does it make sense? Yeah, so you guys should know more about like who's out there with the hot Photoshop skills than I am, because I'm like 40 years old. I'm old and decrepit. You guys should know what's out there and be on the cutting edge. Honestly, I mean that. Okay? So eat, drink, and breathe design and architecture. That's my biggest piece of advice. How many of you have written that down? Some of you haven't. You're going to be like, what was that place? Or you just forget about it. But I'm dead serious. Like, there's a lot you can just learn here, right? And it's not just, there's very narrow things that he's showing, but just sort of seeing some of the techniques and workflows helps you with a lot of sort of wider range than just that narrow, let's make some orange fall-looking wheat grass or something, right? So, you can start to, again, pick things up really nicely, and how to use brushes, how to use eraser brushes, how to use overlay layers, how to make things glow, how to use outer glows and inner glows and the overlays and things like that. So there's lots of techniques you can pick up here. And then we haven't even touched the generative AI tools in Photoshop and Illustrator, right? So they've increasingly incorporated a number of Gen AI tools to help you cut out the background, or to select just the subject or the foreground, or to replace something or get rid of something. So it's relying on the Firefly model, which is kind of mediocre at best, right? If you look at all the diffusion models, Firefly is not the worst, it's not the best. They're sort of playing catch up. They're also trying to train it, as they say, more ethically on licensed material and not just scraping the internet for huge trillion data point training sets. So, there's trade-offs back and forth. But again, this is huge, right? How many of you guys are pretty good at Photoshop already? Some of you are? Yeah. All right. So we'll start talking about that on Wednesday. All right. I'll show you guys a few ways to get some things out of Revit and Rhino, of course. I'll have a few things already pre-made. Then we'll start talking about, again, how to collage and layer things up. Right? How many of you have actually made, like, how many of you took art class in high school? How many of you have actually, like, physically made a collage where you look, cut things out and glue and layer things up? How many of you think collage is like this grid of pictures? That's not collage, right? Collaging is like layering, making textures, making a bigger picture from lots of little tiny pieces, right? So what we'll do is we'll talk about Photoshop and collage and embracing this idea of design collage and not necessarily trying to make everything super photorealistic. You can do that. You have a really effective tool at your disposal, right? I'll show you lots of good examples. Sorry, my nose is just really itchy. My allergies have just been like way off the chain. Something is happening in the autumn time here that my nose doesn't like. All right, are we clear? You turn now on Wednesday, try to just sort of address those outside edges, and so you maybe have one or two perspectives you can play around with on Wednesday. Then the following week I'll be out of town. You won't have class. You guys have work time. Sort of try all this stuff out. Get it all together. When I come back, then we'll see where everybody's at, and we'll try to get everything over the finish line and start project 3.